Hi, I hope everyone had a great holiday. I know I did. After I finished my first semester of college and finals, my brain imploded, literally. So I had to take a few weeks off. But now I'm back here with a video about an actually pretty cool historical figure. During my time off, I was watching a lot of Netflix and YouTube, and I found my way to history channels and stuff like that, and I came across a video, or a few videos, about this person named Sor Juana Ines de la Cruz. Who is that, you might ask? Well, if you're an American, you probably don't know, but she was a Mexican nun, writer, poet, essayist, playwright, and all-around bad bitch extraordinaire. She was known to be like one of the first feminists in the New World, and she was alive in the 1600s. So today we're going to talk about her. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy this story. So when I first learned about her, I was really surprised that I hadn't learned about her in my other classes before, like even in K through 12 in my history classes. But it kind of makes sense because she's a Mexican figure. She's on their money, on the 200 peso note. She's very influential in Mexico, and I live in California, so I didn't get very much exposure to her or any Mexican history, which is sad. We should learn more about other countries' histories. Just a thought. So on November 12th in either 1648 or 1651, there was some confusion with the baptism records, so nobody really knows exactly when she was born. In San Miguel Nepantla, I think is how you say it? San Miguel Nepantla, New Spain, Juana Ramirez de Asbaje is born. Her parents are Pedro Manuel de Asbaje, and her mother is Isabel Ramirez. Her father was a Spanish soldier, and she was born out of wedlock, so her father left her mother to take care of her and her sisters. Luckily for them, her maternal grandfather took the family in, and she was able to live pretty comfortably through her childhood. Juana was a prodigy, a child prodigy. Her mother was illiterate, but since she lived with her grandfather, he had a huge library, and she took to reading. She had barely any formal education. She was mostly self-taught because women being educated at the time was like not allowed, or really close to not allowed. So by the age of 3, she had already learned to read and write in Spanish and Latin. By 13, she had started to write poems in multiple languages, including the Mexican Aztec language. Yeah, and then by 13, she was teaching Latin. So the kid was smart, really smart. When Juana turned 16, her mother and her grandfather sent her to live in Mexico City with some relatives to like introduce her to the world. And she really wanted to go to university out there, and she asked her mom to let her go to attend university in disguise as a guy, but her mom said no. So she didn't do that, though it would have been kind of cool. What she did end up doing is attracting the attention of the viceroy, or the royalty of New Spain. And when I say viceroy from here on out, I mean the king figure. Or when I say part of the viceroy, I mean part of the court. It's confusing, just roll with it. She became a lady-in-waiting in the royal court, and she impressed everybody with her intellect. She was very smart, and she played music, and she wrote poems and read them to everybody. And the king, the viceroy, was like, this kid's really smart. I'm gonna test her knowledge. So when she was 17, she stood up to a panel of 40 scholars who asked her very difficult questions, and she answered all of them correctly. Mind you, these questions went from everywhere from literature to history to science to math equations, and she answered all of them correctly. I wish to know this person. This next part isn't very much talked about, but while she was part of the viceroy's court, she had a romance with one of the members of the royal family, and her name was, it's a really long one, so give me a second, Maria Luisa Gonzaga Manrique de Lara. Juana called her Lisi, so that's what we're gonna call her. So she and Lisi had a little romance, and they advocated for women's rights together, and Juana wrote her a bunch of poems. Lisi made sure that Juana moved up in society and promoted her work and promoted her poems, and it was all really cute. So I don't know exactly how long that relationship lasted. I think it went well went on well after Juana became a nun, but I couldn't find anything on when their relationship ended and when it began. I just know that she had a girlfriend. Since Juana was so popular in the court and she was beautiful and smart and a writer, she got a lot of proposals for marriage. Now, Juana wanted absolutely none of that because not only was she gay, but she also didn't want to give up her freedom. If she got married, she would have to devote herself to her husband and her family, and she didn't want to do that. She wanted to write and she wanted to study. So in 1669, she became a cloistered nun and took on the name Sor Juana Ines de la Cruz. Sor means sister. So while she was in the convent, Sor Juana had everything she could dream. Her work flourished. She had her own cell where she had a huge library with books and instruments for music and science and stuff like that. It was argued to be one of the biggest private libraries in the New World. She had time to study and write, so she wrote plays, essays, poems, music. She taught music and drama to the girls that went to the school that was part of her convent. Her cell became more like a salon, which I don't mean the cut your hair type, I mean the go hang out with high class people. It's basically just a really high-end hangout. She received visits from multiple people of power, from the Viceroy's court and people who had influence in Spain, and she got a lot of these visitors and she grew her reputation, so much so that eventually someone got her work published in Spain. It was a big deal. Her work was really important in Mexico too, in New Spain. She influenced a lot of people with it. You know, the thought of being a cloistered nun is kind of appealing. Not having to leave, having the time to write. But there's no internet. Even now, they don't let you have internet, so I guess I'm not gonna be a nun. Since her Sor Juana was so prevalent and outspoken, she gained a lot of attention, including bad attention, and people got upset. So the real trouble began in 1690 when the Bishop of Puebla, Manuel Fernandez de Santa Cruz, published a critique Juana wrote on a 40-year-old sermon given by a Jesuit preacher. In this publishing, the bishop called her out on using the holy orders to continue her secular studies rather than actually devoting her life to God. And he got really pissy about that because God forbid women think things. She sent a letter, which was a beautiful defense, and it was called Respuesta a Sor Filotea de la Cruz. So in this letter, she not only defended herself, but she defended the right women had to education as a whole, which was just awesome. She argued that secular studies are necessary to understand religious ones, which I agree with because I didn't start understanding religion until I graduated. So then through the rest of the letters, she defends women's rights to private instruction and higher education. She does this by partially twisting the words of some of the past church members, and she cites a lot of biblical women and a lot of historical women and a lot of contemporary women, all of them proving that women should be educated. Needless to say, the church didn't like what she had to say. So things started getting really bad. And unfortunately, by 1694, Sor Juana had to renew her vows. And in those vows, it said that she can no longer study, she can no longer write, she can no longer devote herself to secular studies. Her library got taken away, and she was supposed to devote her life to prayer and good works from here on out. Sor Juana only went to sign this because if she didn't, they were going to make her leave the church, and she didn't want to give that up, understandably. So, in her last act of defiance, and this is my favorite part, when she went to sign her new vows, she cut her hand, and she signed it, La peor de todos, the worst of all, in her own blood. Like, that's the biggest cue ever, and it's so fantastic. So the rest of her story is a really short one. She made good on her vows. She devoted her life to prayer and to good works, and she was, you know, being a good nun. And then she died in an epidemic in 1695. Sor Juana was argued to be one of the first feminists. She was so outspoken about women's issues and women's right to education and independence. She was a woman ahead of her time, and because of it, she's now a majorly important Mexican figure, and she contributed a lot to Spanish literature. Her story is amazing to me. Despite all the limitations people told her she had, she managed to fight the system and be educated and write and make a difference. You know, she was so upfront with her beliefs. She was really really outspoken. She published a lot of controversial things. I'm surprised the church didn't execute her or see her as a witch or something. In other words, I can now add her to my pile of dead role models. I hope you guys had a great break. I hope you guys learned something today, and I'll see you later. Take care.